An instant in the wind. Recording number 34. They found him on the afternoon of the second day, on the far side of the long plain, where the foothills of the next range began. Since early morning, emerging from their shelter for the night, they'd been watching the vultures, the almost invisible specks drifting on the highest currents of the wind and slowly spiraling downwards among the hills. No more than 3 or 4 to start with. Then, appearing from nowhere, another 10 or 12 until the sky was black with them. On this side the plain was much more densely overgrown than before. The earth was dry, with bare parched patches in the shallow gravel ditches eroded by the wind, and clusters of dry branches blown in among the brushwood. Yet from a distance it appeared luxuriant, for the gnarled, thorny shrubs were green from the moisture sucked up from very deep down. White thorn and tanglewood, hodgehog, euphorbia and neboom, aloes, kyrpursul and curry and crossberries, assegai wood, the pale blue of plumbago, an indestructible wild, fierce landscape, its thickets so dense that every now and then the oxen found it impossible to force a passage and had to make wild detours in search of game paths and half-hidden trails. If it hadn't been for the vultures, they would never have discovered the body at all. As it was, they had to swerve far off their course to reach it. Yet neither of them even considered the possibility of not going. Even from 10 yards away, there was nothing to be seen except for the vultures covering the ground and the thorn trees. Some of them with wings half spread, the hideous bare necks stretched forward, the yellow eyes eager and evil. Reluctantly they flapped out of the way as the intruders approached. A couple even dared to follow them with ridiculous little flopping hops, cowardly aggressive. But in the end, they all retreated to more distant trees. He was lying under a shelter of branches. The first they noticed was the pathetic gaiety of small torn patches of clothing fluttering from the dead branches and the long white thorns. Next, the black three-cornered hat, its proud plume broken and dishevelled. "Stay here," said Adam, but she slid off the back of the ox and followed him. A sudden squawk made them stop in their tracks. 2 of the vultures had trapped themselves under the branches covering the body and were trying to break out with a thrashing of wings and claws. Their beaks and throats and breast feathers stained and slimy with blood. Feeling death approach, he must have covered himself with the branches he'd gathered days before. If he hadn't done that, in his efficient, calculating Swedish way, there wouldn't have been anything left for them to see. It was still not a wholesome sight. Most of the face had been torn away. The long maroon overcoat was torn to shreds, some of the shining steel buttons missing. The waistcoat with its gold embroidery was tattered, leaving part of the chest exposed, a couple of ribs horribly protruding through the mangled flesh. Elizabeth forced herself past Adam. He tried to ward her off, but there was something in her attitude as she took his arm and pushed him aside which made him yield. "I must see it," she said quietly. The Hottentots had deserted them. The cattle had been stolen. Fanzel had shot himself and had been buried without really involving or concerning her. But this one was hers. This one she dared not avoid. This one what they'd travelled through the hinterland for. For this she had given up the cape to come with him. In spite of the stench, she went closer and began to pull the branches out of the way. There was a sudden flurry among the surrounding vultures, as if for a moment they all meant to charge and converge on her. But Adam noisily scared them off. Farther back, the oxen were stamping and sniffing anxiously. Strange, all she could think of was the lion hunt. How he'd hit the female with his first shot, stopping her for a second before she resumed her charge with a shattered shoulder. The Hottentots screaming, dropping their guns, fleeing in all directions. You dropping on one knee to take aim. The sickening dead click of the flint. And then, in a brownish, yellowish, roaring streak, the lioness jumped on you and hurled you to the ground. But in mid-jump there was the sudden report from a Hottentot's gun, and as the beast came down on you, Boy was beside you to grapple with it and pull it away. The great jaws locking on his shoulder and upper arm. Now it's all over, I thought, but the lion was already dead. And while Boy rolled aside and went on screaming, the animal remained motionless on top of you. After a long time you began to move under it, crawling out. You looked in my direction, but your eyes were blank. Suddenly, you started running away from me, towards the nearest tree, a mere sapling. Like a baboon, you scrambled up that bare, slender trunk, but the moment you reached the top, it suddenly bent over and deposited you back on the ground. You didn't even seem to be aware of it. You simply started climbing again. The same thing happened. 3 times you climbed the sapling, and 3 times it bent over and dropped you back on the ground. Only then did you stop to look round, discovering that the lioness had been dead all the while. Eric, Alexis, Larson, who are you? This disgusting, bleeding, tattered thing cannot be you. Who were you, calculating latitudes and longitudes and heights above sea level so precisely, stuffing birds with such consummate skill, naming all the plants and animals of the wilderness? Who were you, and how did you get here? Tell me, I want to know. I am your wife. I have a right to know. I'm bearing your child. I want to know. My God, Can't you say something? Adam remained a short distance away from her. Among the branches she'd scattered to reach the body. Here it begins, he thought, feeling the sun beating down on him. Here you will start learning too. Knowledge of death, that's the inevitable start. The day the snake bit me and the old woman sucked out the poison, rubbing in herbs, reviving me. And then that other time when I was dying of thirst on the cracked bed of the dried up river. Mirages dancing in my eyes, the old bushman with his hollow reed, sucking water from the gore where there hadn't been anything, spitting it out on my tongue and into my mouth. You could have died here, right on top of this water. Why don't you keep your eyes open? What are you doing here? If you can't look after yourself, you must stay away from here. Muddy water in my throat, the taste of life.